I wasn't invited to my stepmother's wedding. Actually, that's not quite right. I was explicitly banned. The gold-embossed invitation that arrived at everyone else's mailbox never made it to mine. Instead, I got a text from my half-sister Olivia. "Victoria said you'd just make things awkward. It's better this way." Better for who? I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just smiled and said I understood. But on the day of her lavish wedding, I showed up anyway. Not to cause a scene, but because something felt wrong. And what I discovered that day would unravel everything Victoria had spent years carefully constructing. I was 11 when my mother died. Cancer. The kind that starts quietly and ends loudly with hospital rooms that smell like antiseptic and false hope. I remember her hands, thin and cold, squeezing mine one last time. She made me promise something that day. "Take care of your father," she whispered. "He's not as strong as he thinks he is." I nodded, even though I was just a kid who didn't understand what strength really meant yet. The funeral was small. My father cried once during the eulogy, then never again in front of me. He buried his grief somewhere deep and unreachable, the way men of his generation often do. For a while, it was just the two of us in that big, quiet house. I learned to make scrambled eggs and fold laundry. He learned to pretend everything was fine. 18 months later, Victoria arrived. She wasn't what I expected. My father introduced her casually one Saturday morning, like she was a new car he'd just bought. "This is Victoria," he said, and she smiled at me with perfect white teeth and eyes that didn't quite match the warmth of her expression. She was beautiful in that polished, expensive way. Blonde hair always styled just right, clothes that looked like they came from magazines, a voice that was soft but somehow took up all the space in a room. She worked in public relations, she told me. She knew how to make people believe things. That should have been my first warning. At first, she tried. She asked about school, complimented my drawings, bought me books I never asked for. But there was something performative about it, like she was playing a role she'd rehearsed. My father didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. He was lonely, desperate for someone to fill the silence my mother left behind. Victoria filled it beautifully. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, they were married. I was 13 and suddenly living with a stranger who was redecorating my entire life. The changes started small. My mother's photos came down from the mantel, replaced by abstract art Victoria claimed was more sophisticated. The kitchen my mother loved, with its mismatched dishes and cluttered counters, was renovated into something sterile and white. Victoria said it was about moving forward, about healing, but it felt like erasure. My father went along with everything, nodding absently while signing checks for furniture I didn't recognize and paint colors that made the house feel cold. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I was a kid. What did I know about grief or moving on or protecting the memory of someone who wasn't coming back? Then Olivia was born. I was 14 when Victoria announced her pregnancy, glowing with the kind of joy I hadn't seen in my father's eyes since before my mother got sick. When Olivia arrived, tiny and perfect and absolutely adored, the shift was complete. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the other one. The reminder of a past Victoria wanted to forget. Family dinners became performances where Victoria and my father cooed over Olivia while I sat at the end of the table, chewing quietly, trying to be invisible. Holidays were worse. Christmas morning was all about Olivia's squeals and piles of presents while my gifts sat in a neat, modest stack that screamed afterthought. I graduated high school with honors. Victoria congratulated me politely, then spent the rest of the evening planning Olivia's 5th birthday party. I got into a good college. My father paid the tuition without comment. But when Olivia took her first dance class, he recorded the entire thing and posted it everywhere. I learned to accept it. That's what you do when you're drowning slowly. You stop thrashing and just let the water take you. I moved away for college, then stayed away for work. I built a life that didn't require their approval or their presence. I called on birthdays and holidays, kept things polite, kept things distant. It was easier that way. But I never stopped watching. I noticed things. The way Victoria's smile tightened when my father mentioned his late wife. The way she redirected conversations when anyone asked about her past. The way she controlled everything, from the family calendar to the guest lists at parties, with an iron grip disguised as helpfulness. And then, 2 months ago, the wedding announcement came. Not to me directly. I found out through social media, like a distant acquaintance. Victoria Ashford and Richard Kingsley, prominent businessman, philanthropist, man worth an estimated $200 million. The engagement photos were stunning. Victoria in a cream dress, Richard's arm around her, both of them smiling like they'd just won the lottery. Maybe they had. My father wasn't in any of the photos. I called him. "Dad, what's going on?" He sighed. "She's moving on. We've been separated for a year." Separated. I hadn't known. Nobody told me. "Are you okay?" I asked. He paused. "I'm fine. It's for the best." But he didn't sound fine. He sounded hollow. A week later, the text from Olivia arrived. "Victoria's getting married in 3 weeks. Big event. She said you're not invited. She thinks it would be awkward with Dad and everything. Hope you understand." I stared at that message for a long time. Not invited. To my stepmother's wedding. The woman who raised my half-sister, who lived in my childhood home for over a decade, who benefited from my father's money and connections. And I wasn't even worth a courtesy invitation. I didn't respond to Olivia. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I started digging. It began with a simple Google search, Victoria Ashford. The results were polished, professional. Her PR firm, her charity work, her social media presence that screamed elegance and success. But then I added her maiden name, the one I remembered from old documents, Victoria Chen. The results shifted. Suddenly there were older articles, wedding announcements from 15 years ago. Victoria Chen marries businessman Thomas Harrington. 3 years later, divorce proceedings. Then another marriage, another divorce. A pattern emerging like a ghost in the machine. I clicked deeper, found a forum where people discussed high-profile divorces. Someone had posted about Victoria. Serial bride, they called her. Targets wealthy men, plays the perfect wife, exits with a settlement. My stomach turned. Could that be true? I needed more. I reached out to someone I thought might help. Constance. She'd been our housekeeper when I was younger, worked for the family for nearly a decade before Victoria fired her abruptly. I always liked Constance. She was kind, honest, and had a way of seeing through people. I found her number through an old contact and called. She answered on the 3rd ring. "I wondered when you'd call," she said. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. Constance looked older, grayer, but her eyes were still sharp. "You want to know about Victoria?" she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She stirred her coffee slowly. "I was there when Olivia was born. I heard things, saw things." She paused. "Your father isn't Olivia's biological father." The words hung in the air between us. I couldn't breathe. "What?" Constance leaned forward. "Victoria was already pregnant when she married your father. I don't know who the real father is, but I overheard her on the phone once, arguing with someone. She said, 'He doesn't need to know. It's better this way.'" A few months later, Olivia was born premature. But she wasn't small, she wasn't struggling, she was full term. I felt sick. Does my father know? Constance shook her head. I don't think so. And when I started asking questions, asking if maybe she should tell him the truth, I was let go. Victoria said I was overstepping. Your father didn't fight it. I left that cafe with my world tilting. Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. Olivia, my half-sister, wasn't my sister at all. My father had been deceived for 16 years, and Victoria, the woman who pushed me out of my own family, was a fraud. But I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. That's when I found Margaret Kingsley, Richard's first wife. I tracked her down through public records and sent her a carefully worded email. To my surprise, she responded within hours. "We should meet," she wrote. "I have something you need to see." Margaret lived in a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that whispered old money and quiet power. She greeted me at the door herself, elegant and composed, with silver hair and a gaze that could cut glass. "You're the stepdaughter," she said, not unkindly, "the one she banned from the wedding." I nodded. She smiled, but it was sad. "Come in, let's talk." We sat in her sunroom, surrounded by windows that overlooked manicured gardens. She poured tea I didn't drink and then opened a leather folder. "I hired a private investigator after my divorce," she said, "not out of spite, out of curiosity. Richard moved on so quickly. I wanted to know who this Victoria really was." She slid the folder across the table. Inside were documents, photographs, timelines. Victoria Chen, born in a small town, daughter of immigrants, worked her way through college. Nothing wrong with that. But then the marriages. 3 before my father. Each one ending in a lucrative divorce settlement. Each one following the same pattern. Charm, marriage, control, exit. Margaret pointed to a photo. "This is from her second marriage. Look at the date." I looked. The wedding was 6 months after her first divorce was finalized. "She doesn't wait," Margaret said. "She plans. She's strategic." Then Margaret pulled out another document, a DNA test. "I managed to get a sample from Olivia at a charity event your stepmother brought her to. Don't ask how. It's not pretty. But I had it compared to your father's DNA, which was easy enough to obtain from a discarded coffee cup." She looked at me seriously. "Olivia is not your father's biological daughter. I'm 99.9% certain." I stared at the paper, the numbers, the scientific certainty, the undeniable truth. My father had been living a lie for 16 years. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Margaret's expression softened. "Because I'm tired of watching her destroy families. And because I saw you, at the engagement party, the way you looked at your father. You actually care about him. That's rare." She leaned back. "Victoria is marrying Richard for his money and his connections. She'll drain him dry, just like the others. But more than that, I think she's dangerous. Not physically, emotionally, psychologically. She manipulates, controls, erases. And I can't let her do it again without at least trying to stop it." I looked at the documents spread across the table. "What do you want me to do?" Margaret smiled. "Go to the wedding, confront her, but do it smart. Don't make a scene. Make her confess. I'll be there too. And if she won't come clean, we'll do it for her." So that's how I found myself standing outside the Kingsley estate on a perfect Saturday afternoon, watching limousines and luxury cars pull up to a mansion that looked like it belonged in a European fairy tale. The gardens were immaculate, white roses everywhere, strings of lights waiting to glow at dusk. Security guards in discreet black suits checked invitations at the entrance. I wasn't on the list, but I'd come prepared. I wore a simple navy dress, elegant but forgettable, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. I looked like I belonged, like I was just another guest who'd wandered in. I circled around to the service entrance, where catering staff rushed back and forth with trays and flowers. I slipped in behind a woman carrying a tower of champagne glasses. Nobody stopped me. Inside, the estate was even more breathtaking. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls covered in art that probably cost more than most people's houses. I moved through the hallways slowly, following the sound of music and laughter toward the ceremony space. It was happening in the garden, under an elaborate floral arch. I stayed at the edge, partially hidden behind a column, and watched. There were hundreds of people, politicians, celebrities, business moguls. Everyone who was anyone. And at the center of it all, Victoria. She wore a dress that probably cost $50,000, all lace and silk and understated elegance. Her hair was perfect. Her smile was perfect. She looked like a woman who had everything. Richard stood beside her, older, graying, but genuinely smiling. He looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. My father was there too, sitting in the third row, alone. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. His suit was expensive but hung on him like it didn't quite fit anymore. Olivia stood beside Victoria as maid of honor, radiant in a pale pink gown, beaming with pride. I felt a pang of something, not jealousy, sadness maybe, for what could have been, for the family we never really were. The ceremony was short, efficient, beautiful. Victoria and Richard exchanged vows that sounded like they'd been written by a professional. Probably had been. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," the crowd erupted in applause. I didn't clap. I just watched Victoria's face. And for just a second, I saw it. A flicker of something. Not joy. Calculation. Like she was checking off a box. Mission accomplished. Then her mask slipped back into place, and she was the blushing bride again, waving to the crowd, kissing her new husband, glowing under the attention. The reception was even more extravagant. A massive tent with chandeliers, tables draped in white silk, a live orchestra playing. I moved through the crowd carefully, avoiding anyone who might recognize me. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and pretended to sip it while I listened to conversations. People talked about how perfect the wedding was, how beautiful the bride was, how lucky Richard was. Nobody mentioned Victoria's past. Nobody questioned anything. That's the thing about wealth and charm. It makes people blind. I was standing near the edge of the tent when I saw her. Margaret. She was seated at a table near the back, watching the crowd with the same sharp gaze I'd seen in her sunroom. She caught my eye and gave a slight nod. It was time. I made my way toward the house, slipping away from the noise and the crowd. I knew where Victoria would be. Before the first dance, before the toasts, she'd want a moment to check her makeup, to compose herself. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, following the sound of soft music. And there it was. The bridal suite. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. Victoria stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting her veil, touching up her lipstick. She saw me in the reflection and froze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she turned, slowly, and I saw her expression shift. Surprise, then annoyance, then something colder. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "I know." Victoria set down her lipstick. "Did you come to congratulate me, or to cause a problem?" I looked at her. This woman who had taken so much from me. My family, my home, my father's trust. "I came for the truth," I said. She laughed. A soft, bitter sound. "The truth." "Which truth are you looking for? There are so many." I pulled out my phone and held it up. On the screen was a photo of the DNA test Margaret had given me. This truth. Olivia isn't my father's daughter. Victoria's face didn't change. She didn't gasp or deny it. She just looked at the screen, then at me. "So you know," she said simply. "How long?" I asked. "Did you know before you married him?" She smiled. "Of course I did." The admission was so casual, so devoid of guilt, that it took my breath away. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do that?" Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the party below. "Because I needed security. I needed a future. I was pregnant, alone, and terrified. Your father was kind, vulnerable, wealthy enough. He was the perfect solution. She turned back to me. And before you judge me, remember that I gave Olivia a good life, a stable home, a father who loved her, even if he didn't share her blood. I gave her everything. I shook my head. You built it all on a lie. She shrugged. Most families are built on lies. Mine was just more intentional. I felt anger rising, hot and sharp. And me? Why did you push me out? Victoria's expression hardened. Because you were a threat. You were smart, observant. You asked too many questions. You remembered your mother too well. I couldn't have you around, reminding your father of what he lost, making him question what he had. She stepped closer. So yes, I made your life uncomfortable. I made you feel unwanted. I pushed you away. And it worked. You left. The honesty was almost worse than the deception. And now? I asked. Now you're doing it again, with Richard, another wealthy man, another fresh start. Victoria smiled. Richard is different. He's smarter, richer, more connected. This isn't just about money. It's about power, influence, a life I could never have had otherwise. She looked at me with something almost like pity. You think I'm a villain, but I'm a survivor. I did what I had to do, and I won't apologize for it. I took a breath. My father deserves to know the truth. So does Richard. Victoria's smile faded. You wouldn't dare. I held up my phone again. I have proof. DNA tests, records of your previous marriages, everything. Her face went pale. For the first time, I saw fear. If you expose me, you'll destroy Olivia too. She'll lose everything. Her father, her family, her entire identity. I felt the weight of that. Olivia was innocent in all this, but so was my father. Then tell them yourself, I said. Confess to Richard before I do. Tell my father the truth. Give them the choice to forgive you or walk away. But do it honestly. Victoria stared at me. And if I don't? I met her gaze. Then I will. Publicly. At the reception. In front of everyone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria's hands trembled slightly. Her mask, the one she wore so perfectly, was cracking. You'd really do that? She whispered. After everything? I thought about my mother. About my father. About the years I spent feeling like I didn't belong in my own family. Yes, I said. I would. Victoria turned away, her shoulders tense. You don't understand what it's like, she said quietly. To have nothing. To claw your way up. To finally have something stable, something safe. Her voice broke. I can't lose this. I felt a flicker of something. Not sympathy, exactly, but understanding. Then don't lose it by lying. Lose it by being honest. Maybe Richard will surprise you. Maybe he'll forgive you. But if he finds out later, from someone else, you'll lose him anyway. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded, just once. I need time. I shook my head. You have until the end of the reception. Tell them or I will. And with that, I walked out. If you've made it this far, I need to know you're real. Drop the word truth in the comments below. Just that one word. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because what comes next is even more intense. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I didn't go back to the party immediately. I needed air, space, a moment to steady myself. I found a quiet corner of the garden, away from the lights and the music, and just breathed. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I'd just confronted the woman who'd haunted my life for years. I'd given her an ultimatum, and now I had to wait to see if she'd follow through. Part of me didn't believe she would. Victoria was a survivor. She'd said so herself. Survivors don't confess. They adapt. They lie better. They find new ways to win. But another part of me hoped, not for her sake, but for my father's, for Olivia's, for the truth that had been buried for so long. I checked my phone. Margaret had texted. "Where are you? Is it done?" I replied simply, "Waiting." She sent back a thumbs up. I walked slowly back toward the reception. The party was in full swing now. The first dance had happened while I was gone. Now guests were mingling, drinking, laughing. The orchestra had been replaced by a DJ playing something upbeat. I spotted my father standing near the bar, alone, nursing a drink. I wanted to go to him, to tell him everything, but I'd promised Victoria time. I'd keep that promise. For now. Olivia was dancing with some friends. Her face flushed and happy. She looked so young, so unaware of the storm about to hit. I felt a pang of guilt. She didn't deserve this. But she also deserved to know the truth about her own life. I found Margaret at her table. She was watching the crowd with the intensity of a hawk. "Did she agree?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "She has until the end of the night." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You believe her?" I shrugged. I gave her a choice. What she does with it is up to her. An hour passed, then another. The night deepened. The champagne kept flowing. Victoria and Richard made their rounds, greeting guests, posing for photos, playing the perfect couple. Victoria's smile never wavered, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted around the room, searching. She was looking for me, making sure I was still there, making sure the threat was real. I stayed visible. I wanted her to know I wasn't bluffing. As the night wore on, I started to think she wouldn't do it, that she'd gamble on me not having the courage to expose her publicly. But then, just after midnight, as the party was beginning to wind down, Victoria stepped up to the microphone. The music faded, conversations quieted. Everyone turned to look at her. Richard stood beside her, smiling, expecting some sweet speech about love and gratitude. Victoria's hands gripped the microphone stand. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "This has been the most beautiful day of my life." She paused, looked at Richard. "But before this night ends, there's something I need to say." Richard's smile faltered slightly. Confusion flickered across his face. The crowd leaned in, intrigued. Victoria took a breath. "I haven't always been honest about my past, about who I was before I became the woman standing here." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I've been married before, more than once. And each time, I entered those marriages for the wrong reasons. Not for love, but for security, for survival." Her voice cracked. "I grew up with nothing, and I was terrified of going back to that. So I made choices. Choices I'm not proud of." Richard's face had gone pale. "Victoria, what are you—" She held up a hand. "Please, let me finish." The room was dead silent now. "When I married my last husband, I was already pregnant with another man's child. I didn't tell him the truth. I let him believe the baby was his. And for 16 years, I've let him raise a daughter who isn't biologically his." Gasps echoed through the tent. I saw my father's face across the room. He'd gone rigid, his drink frozen halfway to his lips. Olivia had stopped dancing. She was staring at Victoria, eyes wide, not comprehending yet. Victoria's voice shook. I told myself I was protecting everyone, protecting the child, protecting the family, but I was really just protecting myself, from consequences, from judgment, from losing everything I'd built. Tears were streaming down her face now, real tears, not the performative kind. And tonight, someone reminded me that no matter how much I try to control, to manipulate, to build a perfect life on top of lies, the truth always finds a way out. She looked directly at me. Our eyes met across the crowded room. "Richard," she turned to him, "I haven't lied to you, not yet, but I was going to. I was going to build another life on another foundation of half-truths. And I can't do that anymore. I won't. Richard's expression was unreadable. Shock, maybe. Betrayal. Confusion. I understand if you want to annul this marriage, if you never want to see me again. I understand if everyone here thinks I'm a monster. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe I am. Then she stepped away from the microphone and walked off the stage. The room erupted. People talking over each other, phones coming out, cameras flashing. Richard stood frozen, staring after her. And my father. My father pushed through the crowd toward Olivia, who was crying now, her perfect night shattered. I moved toward them. "Dad," I said. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw him really see me. "You knew," he said. "It wasn't a question. I found out recently. I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't apologize. You did what I should have done years ago. You asked questions." Olivia grabbed my arm. "Is it true?" Her voice was small, broken. "About me? About my father?" I looked at this girl I'd grown up resenting, this girl who'd taken my place and felt only sadness. "I think so. But biologically doesn't mean everything. Dad raised you. He loves you. That's real." She sobbed. "But she lied. About everything." I nodded. "Yeah, she did." My father pulled Olivia into a hug. "We'll figure this out," he told her. "Together. As a family." He looked at me. All of us. I felt something break open in my chest. Relief, maybe. Or the beginning of healing. Margaret appeared beside me. "Well?" she said quietly. That was dramatic. I almost laughed. "You think Richard will stay with her?" Margaret watched as Richard disappeared in the direction Victoria had gone. "I don't know. Maybe, if he's a better man than the rest of us. But at least now he knows what he's choosing." She looked at me. "You did the right thing." I wasn't sure if I believed that yet, but I nodded anyway. The party dissolved after that. Guests left in confused clusters, whispering and speculating. The staff started clearing tables, their faces carefully neutral. I found my father and Olivia in a quiet corner. "Come home with me," I told them. "Both of you. Tonight." My father looked surprised. "Your place?" I smiled. "Yeah, it's small, but it's honest. No lies, no performances, just us." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Olivia wiped her eyes. "Can I really come?" I took her hand. "Of course. You're my sister. That doesn't change." We left the Kingsley estate together, the three of us, stepping out into the cool night air. Behind us, the lights of the party were fading. Ahead, I didn't know what was waiting. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking alone. As we drove through the quiet streets, my father spoke. "I should have protected you. From her. From everything." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You were grieving. You didn't know." He shook his head. "That's not an excuse. I let her push you out. I let her control everything. I was weak." I pulled the car over for a moment, turned to face him. "You're not weak. You were lonely. You were human. And you're here now. That's what matters." Olivia, sitting in the back seat, spoke quietly. "What happens now? To Victoria? To us?" I didn't have an answer. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out, one day at a time." We drove the rest of the way in silence. When we got to my apartment, small and cluttered and nothing like the mansion they were used to, I made tea. We sat at my kitchen table, the three of us, and just existed together. No pretense. No performance. Just family. Messy. Broken. But real. A few days later, I got a call from Margaret. "Thought you'd want to know. Richard didn't annul the marriage. He's in therapy with Victoria. Apparently, he said her honesty, even if it came late, was worth more than a perfect lie." I was surprised. "Really?" Margaret chuckled. "Love makes people do strange things." Or maybe he's just lonely too. Either way, they're trying. I thought about that, about second chances, about how the truth, no matter how painful, can sometimes open doors instead of closing them. My father and Olivia stayed with me for 2 weeks. In that time, we talked more than we had in years, about my mother, about grief, about the lies we'd all lived with. My father cried when he talked about how he'd failed me. Olivia cried when she realized the sister she'd ignored had actually been protecting her all along. And I cried too. For the years we'd lost. For the family we could have been. But also for the family we were becoming. Eventually, they went back to the house. My father filed for divorce from Victoria. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Olivia started seeing a therapist, working through the identity crisis that comes with learning your entire origin story was a lie. She reached out to me regularly now, texted me about school, about boys, about the small things that sisters talk about. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, painful conversations, days when old resentments bubbled up. But we were trying, and that was more than we'd ever had before. As for Victoria, I heard she and Richard moved away, started over somewhere new. I don't know if she's changed. I don't know if people like her can change. But she gave me something, even if she didn't mean to. She gave me my family back. Not the family I'd lost when my mother died, but a new one. Built on truth instead of lies, on choice instead of obligation. And that's worth more than any perfect wedding or polished life could ever be. So here's my question for you. Did I do the right thing by crashing that wedding and forcing the truth out? Or should I have let them all keep living the lie? Some people say ignorance is bliss, that some truths are better left buried. But I look at my father now, at how he's rebuilding his life with honesty, and I think they're wrong. The truth hurts, but it also heals. It also sets you free. What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about family secrets, messy confrontations, and finding truth in the wreckage, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, the next story is going to blow your mind.